Good afternoon and good morning to everybody, depending upon where you are, and welcome to the third quarter webinar that is dealing with law enforcement, traffic safety, and specifically looking at fatalities in law enforcement that involve traffic safety. Joining me today, and our true host is Will Price from NHTSA's Enforcement and Justice Services Division. We've got a good program for you today, but I'll turn it over to Will to just say hello.
Good morning. Well, it's still morning here in Phoenix, and good afternoon. And for everyone who's joined us online, thank you for taking the time to visit with us. As you know, our primary mission is traffic safety, but we never forget that law enforcement and first responders are critical in making progress and trying to reduce the number of traffic fatalities that we experience. And with respect to our work with the memorial, we have a very specific focus on protecting and saving the lives of our law enforcement officers and others who respond to crashes, who are making traffic stops and place themselves in harm's way, very often doing the work that helps us advance our mission. So, Nick, thank you for pulling this one together. We're very committed to the safety of our law enforcement officers. We're always concerned, and we feel every loss that takes place in a traffic-related incident, whether it's a traffic crash, a motorcycle crash, or struck by. And of course, our hearts also go out to those who were losing to the COVID-19 virus. So thank you for pulling this together, and Lieutenant Commander, thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand it back to you, Nick, and looking forward to a great show.
Okay, great. Thank you, Will. A few things that we want to do today. And meanwhile, if you have questions, we want you to send your questions in. And if you have comments, if you have anything you'd like to share that we might have an opportunity to pass on, or any relevant comments, I would encourage you to also post those, and we'll come to them as we go through the webinar today. I want to update you on what is happening at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund and give you some information on what's happening with regard to Police Week. Currently, if you remember the previous webinars we've done, I broadcast here from the museum, and I'm in the museum today. And you can see behind me, there is a sword. I'm in the Hoover Room of the National Law Enforcement Museum. It's a research center. The National Law Enforcement Museum has all of J. Edgar Hoover's papers. This sword was presented to him in 1964 by Loyola University in Chicago in recognition of his service. Also, if you visit the museum here, you can see his actual desk, chair, and the arrangement he had as director of the FBI for those many, many long years. You also may notice a banner behind me. This is one of the pull-up banners that we take with us when we take our show on the road. Unfortunately, as Will mentioned, due to COVID, a lot of those conferences are being canceled or otherwise mitigated, so we're not able to get out as often as we'd like. But the saying back there is preventing the preventable. And that's one of the things that you should and will hear us harp on with regard to some of these law enforcement crashes. They are preventable. And that's really what we should be focusing on, is some of these preventable crashes. Not that we're not going to ignore all of them, but there are some things that we can do to improve safety for law enforcement. So I'll take you through where we are at the current year in this portion of the third quarter. We're not quite through the third quarter, but I'll take you up to date on all the research we've done thus far and give you a picture of how things stand. And then I'll close out my portion by showing you some of the resources that we have here quickly. And these are resources that you can contact us for, and we will send them to you. Since we can't get out to you, if you need these or are interested in these resources, which are physical resources, we can put them in a box and send them out to you, so you're able to use them and give them out to your constituents or whatever agencies it is that you're working with. And then once when I'm done, I'll introduce the Lieutenant Commander, who's going to take us through a crash investigation and talk to us a little bit about some of the investigations that NIOSH has done. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. And so we are here today, September 15th, and we are looking at roughly 3/4 of data through the year 2021. We will do a final webinar at the end of the year. You will get all of the best totals and all the best data we can give at that time. And so that'll be our 4th quarter. We'll probably have that in January of 2022. As I mentioned, I work for the National Law Enforcement Memorial and Museum, and thank goodness to our terrific relationship with NHTSA. I've worked here now for almost 8 years, and one of the best relationships we have with some of our grantors or cooperative agreements that we have with some agencies, federal agencies, one of the best ones is without a doubt working with NHTSA. You see the memorial on the left and then the new museum on the right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the museum. There's a lot going on now, and I just want to quickly tell you about some of the things that are happening here in DC. There, of course, is a shot of the names of the walls. I think in my last quarter, I talked to you about the expansion. It's very unfortunate, but especially with all of the COVID names that are being added now, we had to expand the memorial to make room for more names. I covered that in my last webinar, but you can see this white line here, that's where a new slate has been added, a capstone, if you will, for us to add more names onto the National Law Enforcement Memorial. We've got a new exhibit, and I just walked through it this morning, and it is about law enforcement post 9/11 and the evolution of law enforcement through that last 20 years and how things have changed. If you are able to come here to Washington, either for the upcoming police week, which is not the regular police week in October, but if you're here in October or at any other time, I certainly would encourage you to view the museum. If you are in law enforcement, you get a discount. There are some very significant artifacts from not only that day, but also from other cases that take us up to the present. Things like the Boston Marathon bombing, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, and some other cases. We've also added a driving simulator. So now we used to have and we still do, we have a judgment simulator. We now, to enhance safety and show what law enforcement is doing to train to improve traffic safety and driver safety, we've added a driving simulator. And we're getting ready to put some new images up on the wall in there that are going to tout some of our research to show people what's happening with law enforcement crashes and what agencies are doing to improve it and make it safer for the officers out on the street. We also redesigned our website, and this is good for you to know because it's easy to navigate. We now are following a 3 pillars design here at the National Law Enforcement and Memorial Museum. And that is, we have the memorial, we have the museum, and then we have officer safety and wellness. And as you see on the screen, each one of these is divided into thirds, and you can click on whichever one you're interested in and get more data. Of course, all of our officer safety and wellness information is under that officer safety and wellness tab, and you can click on learn more. I want to bring you up to date quickly on the events that are going. Here is a calendar of events. A couple of things have changed because of COVID, but the events scheduled for the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th, which will be the Candlelight Vigil, which will be held on the National Mall, which is an amazing, amazing experience if you've never been there. And we will be reading the names from 2021. Those are all outdoor events, so those are still going forward. We are still having the Destination Zero conference. We encourage you to register for that. That will be a day-long, free of charge conference covering all issues of officer safety and wellness. And then at the end of that, we are going to be also giving out the National Officer Safety and Wellness Awards. Part of those awards is a category in officer traffic safety. And that's where we get a lot of these great ideas about how to reduce crashes and improve training and get officers to wear their seatbelt, etc. So here we are. We're going to just talk about where things are today. in terms of law enforcement fatalities. And as you see, that category, the category that we're interested in today, is traffic related, and we're 30% above where we were in 2020. And earlier on during this quarter, before we got into August and late July, we were on pace to far outpace where we were in recent memory. And later on in the presentation, I might remind you, in 2019, we had 19 struck by crashes for the entire year, and that was one of our highest years. Here it is in 2021, we're not even through the third quarter, and we've already had 21 struck by crashes that are fatalities. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, since that seems to be one of the major topics, one of the major trends, I should say, going forward this year. Here are some of our recently fallen officers, and some of these are officers who were killed by gunfire. Some were killed by COVID, others were killed in traffic-related incidents. As you see there, the Memorial Fund has approved, and we've kind of gone to a different model now about how we're pushing out our names. We have approved, we go through a constant process now of approving names because so many are coming in. It used to be we would have a names committee meeting every so often when we had a bunch of cases and then approve them. Now they're doing it regularly because they have so many cases tied to COVID that are coming in. So since the last webinar, we've approved 63 line of duty deaths. 5 of those were traffic related. So let's look at the traffic related fatalities of 2021 so far. And I'm going to tell you why there's a tow crane up there in just a second. So far, we've had 19 automobile crashes that have been fatal, 5 of which were single vehicle crashes. Now, normally single vehicle crashes can make up almost a half of those auto crashes. And that's something that we always are harping on, are the single vehicle crashes. 5 is actually not too bad for where we've been in the past. So perhaps in that category, we've seen a little improvement. I mentioned struck by vehicles, 21 so far this year, and we still have a whole nother quarter of the year to go through. And then we also track motorcycle crashes, and we've had 4 motorcycle crashes this year for a total of 44 line of duty deaths. I'm going to give you a little bit of a caveat to that 44. We often get sent cases, or cases are sent in for us to examine, and we look at them and begin to include the data in a spreadsheet that I keep. And sometimes those cases don't go forward. In other words, the agency will contact us and say, this was an off-duty crash and it doesn't meet the criteria. So very often that number might change. And I would anticipate a couple of them, because we've had a few off-duty crashes that it appears may not have been duty related, so they wouldn't meet the criteria of a line of duty death. If you look down at the bottom of that slide, you'll see I also put fire and EMS, the number of struck by crashes, fatalities that they've suffered this year. There's 7. And then towing and recovery. They've had 16 across the nation struck and killed. And folks, we're not even counting the injuries, right? We're not even counting the near misses. And at the beginning of August, I was asked by the Emergency Responder Safety Institute to come and join them in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for a mini summit, if you will. Most of the folks there were fire. There were some folks from towing and recovery. I was there from law enforcement, and they began to discuss policy and better strategies for improving highway safety to prevent secondary crashes while officers are conducting enforcement, but primarily at crash scenes. And if you've seen previous presentations by me, you know that crash scenes are some of the most dangerous for officers when they get struck. And if we employ some of the strategies that we've talked about, TIMS and other things, we can greatly reduce those tragedies. But this summit in Harrisburg is, I think, part of a larger group of people that are looking to get all the states to buy in and give data. And we have the crash data. All the states have the crash data. We may not have near miss data, but if we could at least get crashes, injuries, as well as the fatality data, we'll begin to develop a bigger picture. And you may or may not be familiar with the Duckworth Durbin bill to help improve roadside safety. with improved signage, some new federal regulations, as well as evaluating slow down and move over. And as you look at my presentations, I will usually discuss slow down and move over and how many cases were involved in a violation of that law. Speaking of which, so as we break down the crashes in 2021 so far, and again, you have to remember this is preliminary data that I get and sift through. 8 of the drivers involved in collisions or who struck officers were impaired, 2 were distracted, and 1 was drowsy. And these are things that come out immediately on the scene or a few days after that get communicated to us. 4 officers so far this year have been confirmed to have not had their seatbelts on when they were involved in their crash. Inclement weather is only cited in 1 of the crashes, and this is one of the things we look at because weather can often be a mitigating factor. Ice is normally one of the strongly mitigating factors where officers, or rain, but ice is one of the ones I've found in the past to be one of the more hazardous weathers or items that impaired driving, and we haven't had a lot cited this year. Most of the conditions I've recorded have been clear, and a lot of these crashes have happened during the day. I mentioned slow down and move over, so already 10 of the cases we have involved a violation of the slow down and move over law in that state. So I would examine the circumstances of the crash that occurred and tie it to a violation of that law. So one of the things that has come out, and again, I'm not calling it a trend, but it's something we have to look at. Since 2015, 10 officers have been killed deploying tire deflation devices. These are known as also stop sticks and a couple of other brand names. And unfortunately, 3 of those officers were struck by police vehicles. And it's a sad state of affairs when that happens. And 2 so far this year, 2 officers have been killed deploying or trying to pull back during the pursuit those tire deflation devices. So if you're an executive or a trainer or you're working with agencies that are using these a lot, it would behoove you to contact them and make sure they've got a good training protocol on how they set these things up and ensuring that their officers are safe when doing this pretty dangerous thing, which is putting yourself out there and having to get that thing into the roadway. As we track all of these things, the states with the highest number of traffic-related fatalities are South Carolina, Texas, and Illinois. They have 3 each. Florida has 4, Arizona has 5, and California has 7. One of the things that is a little different this year than in years past, as I break these things down by region, is normally Region 6 with Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Mississippi leads the way. That is not the case this year. Regions 4 and 9 represent about 50% of all the law enforcement line of duty deaths that are traffic related this year. So there is a bit of a shift there with 9 and 4 taking the lead and 6 having relatively few crashes. I mentioned I was going to take you through resources. We talked about this in our last webinar, but again, this is, I think, a good video that we did out there in Macedonia, Ohio, and it had some good safety tips. And if you watch that video, you can see, and I think yourself can see room for improvement, see where things could have been done a little bit differently, but also be very pleased that that officer survived that collision and then listen to what he says about it afterwards. And I'm going to touch on a couple of those things as I close my remarks out. So I wanted you to know about resources. Again, the video is one of those resources. It's on our website under that tab I showed you earlier. This is a key that is a USB or flash drive. We prepare this item, comes in a nice little box. It's got our logo on it. But what you see on the right here, if you can see my cursor, and it's a little hard to read, but we have all 3 of the safety videos we've produced, as well as all of the data analysis we've done from 2015 to 2019, which is 5 years of data in those PowerPoints. And then you have fact sheets that you can use to print out, post on the wall, or share with your officers. These are the materials we can share with you. So if people are interested in these USB flash drives to hand out to their agencies, ask us and we will send them to you. We were supposed to be at IACP. IACP, as you know, you may know, got canceled due to Ida, as well as I think COVID. But normally we would hand out close to 1,000 of these things at IACP. So if you are interested in this information to be shared, please contact me, and we will make sure we send them out to you. I mentioned I would go over some of the things that the officer had mentioned in his crash video, and one of those things was, you know, he had his body armor on, and he says, "I'm glad I had my vest on," because he felt that helped further protect him against the impact of the car. So it's not just reflective vests that we want to see. It's not just seat belts, but we also want officers to wear their body armor for not just the obvious reason, protecting them from gunfire, but also in protecting them from impact injuries. These are some of the things that we recommend agencies do and look at and officers think about as they're making traffic stops, assisting motorists, or coming up onto the scene of a crash. Conduct right side passenger approaches, tactically position your vehicle to protect you. In other words, always create that safety lane. And I know of a lot of you who are in law enforcement, we were all trained to do it, but I've seen plenty of traffic stops where officers haven't done it. One of the other things I've noticed is that vehicles now, a lot of agencies, and you even saw in that picture in that second to last slide, are going to black vehicles with almost subdued markings. I don't agree with that. I think white is the most visible vehicle there is, and it is important to make your vehicle visible and to have it conspicuously marked. And if you see how the fire department marks their vehicles, we should be doing the same thing with that chevron striping in the back. Something to alert drivers that you're there, more than just maybe, you know, whatever your police agency is on the trunk of your car. And then, of course, learn about TIMS and the traffic incident management system. So this is my name and information. I'll leave it up there for a second, but we can put it back up there if you want later. But you can reach us by sending, you can send me an email at nleomf.org or call my cell and leave me a message and I'll get right back to you. So I also wanted to make sure that you saw these. We can also send these out. Hopefully everybody can see that. These are these little information cards, again, things we hand out. We are able to send out some of these laminated things that are really good to post, to hand out, put them in the restrooms, put them wherever you have people's attention to get them to think about wearing their seatbelts or slowing down and doing those things that make their jobs safer. So now I want to introduce Lieutenant Commander Melanie Stefanik. She is a health officer with the United States Public Health Service. She's currently assigned to the Safety and Occupational Health. She is a Safety and Occupational Health Specialist with NIOSH, which falls under the CDC. NIOSH is the National Institute of Occupational Health and Safety. And she is in the Division of Safety Research, Surveillance, and Field Investigative Branch. And she's an investigator for their Fatality Assessment and Control Evaluation. And she's been doing that since 2007. She's got a Bachelor of Science in Information Systems Management, as well as a Master's of Science in Safety Management. So I'd like to welcome Lieutenant Commander Stefanik and look forward to hearing from her.
Thank you for the great introduction, Nick. I'm going to pull my slides up here real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully I didn't fumble your stuff too badly.
No, you're okay. You're okay. Make sure you all can see that. Is that visible?
Yeah, we're good, Melanie. We can
Okay.
see it. Yep.
That's good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop my video here just so I don't distract myself. All right. Again, thanks for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. So as mentioned, I'm a fatality investigator for the Fatality Assessment and Control Evaluation Team, also known as FACE. So in the next slides, I'll give you an overview of what NIOSH is, what FACE is, and some of the law enforcement officer motor vehicle fatality investigation process and an in-depth look at investigation that I had conducted. So the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, conducts research and recommendations to prevent work-related injuries and illnesses. It's part of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and we are not a regulatory agency. The Within NIOSH is the Division of Safety Research, and the division works to address the safety issues in the workplace. It's focal point for traumatic injury research at NIOSH. Through our research, we identify, reduce, and prevent work-related injuries and deaths across all industries. And our research program includes injury data collection and analysis, field investigations, epidemiology, protective technology, safety engineering, and health communications. So a few years ago, we participated in a pilot program with NIJ to investigate law enforcement officer crashes. Why? Well, crashes are important and preventable form of death. The data on crashes was hard to come by, and there was little evidence on how to prevent them. There was minimal research into these risk factors. So could NIOSH model the investigating occupational deaths work in law enforcement? So what I mean by that is we investigate, develop reports, write recommendations, and share with the law enforcement community. So in the last 10 years, on average, 1 officer per week has been killed on our nation's roads. Most years, motor vehicle related incidents, including crashes and being struck by moving vehicles while on foot, were the main cause of death for these officers. From the statistics that Nick had provided, in addition, so 2010 to 2019, there were 1,558 officer line of duty deaths. 393 were due to vehicle crashes. That's 25%. 132 officer line of duty deaths were due to being struck by a vehicle. That's 8% of the total. So under the pilot study, we completed 5 total motor vehicle related fatality investigations, 2 of which were crashes and 3 were struck by. So our team is moving forward and continuing the law enforcement officer motor vehicle related fatality investigations as a target under our FACE program. So what is FACE? So within the Division of Safety Research is the FACE program. FACE is a research program for the identification, investigation, and prevention of fatal occupational injuries through surveillance, on-site investigations, and prevention activities. And this is the team listed, our project officer, team lead, and as you see, myself and Jennifer Lincoln as investigators. So with the objective of identifying work situations at high risk for fatal injury, and we formulate and disseminate prevention strategies to those who can intervene in the workplace. There's 2 components of FACE. We have NIOSH FACE, which is the Division of Safety Research Fatality Investigation Team. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we receive case identification from state and federal agencies, and then we have state FACE, which identifies case through state level surveillance systems. And those are currently our 7 states that we have cooperative agreements with. So why do we do it? 5,250 occupational injury deaths in the United States in 2018. Approximately that's 13 deaths per day. So FACE, NIOSH FACE is a public health practice program. We do not enforce compliance, determine fault, or place blame. We don't use names of the deceased, coworkers, employees, or incident site owners in our reports or publications, and participation is strictly voluntary. Currently, we have target areas under FACE for our investigations, such as robot-related, tree care or arborist, powered industrial trucks, and warehousing, tow truck drivers, waste collection, sanitation, and now a focus area is law enforcement officer motor vehicle fatalities. For the law enforcement officer motor vehicle related fatalities, some of the situations that we've studied include motor vehicle crash while in pursuit, patrol, emergency response, or commute between the duty station, struck by motor vehicle while operating a traffic stop, roadblock, or other emergency or assisting motorist, and law enforcement officer or ground vehicles excluding motorcycles. As I mentioned, the investigation format, we follow the public health model. We interview law enforcement and other agency witnesses on a cooperative basis, and we make our investigations impartial and transparent. Sources for our investigation include a site visit. This is temporarily done virtually due to the pandemic, although recently we conducted an investigation virtually and we had great success with, so I can see that being a potential new way of life in the future. We also received copies of the training records and SOPs, dash camera videos, department reports, and or reconstruction reports, the coroner, and or medical examiner reports. And then we conduct interviews with the State Police Academy instructors, non-civilian witnesses, firefighters, and EMS responders. So then once we receive the information, we conduct the investigation and then have interviews, and then we create this report. The NIOSH report describes the event without personal identifiers. It doesn't place blame. It includes contributing factors and lessons learned, and it's reviewed by subject matter experts, potentially some of you. So feel free to contact me if this may be of interest to you, because we're always looking for some SMEs. And then the draft is sent to the department for comment and fact check. And then finally, the report is published on the NIOSH Law Enforcement Officer Motor Vehicle Safety page, listed here, as well as the NIOSH Face webpage. And if we have time at the end, I can go through those pages and show you where the location of the reports are. So I'll now go into an in-depth detail of an investigation. I was actually the lead investigator on this report. The report is titled "Officer Struck by a Motorhome While Establishing Temporary Traffic Control on an Interstate, Tennessee." So for this investigation, we reviewed the officer's training record, incident photographs, the Metro Police Department Fatal Collision Report, witness statements, and the Metro Police Department Training Academy curriculum. We met with the Metro Crash Investigation Unit who investigated and reconstructed the crash, and then interviews were conducted with the Tennessee Department of Transportation help truck operator who was talking to the officer when the crash occurred. So to give you an overview of this incident, on May 10th, 2014, a 25-year-old police officer was fatally injured when he was struck by a motorhome and drug under the trailer it was pulling on a 4-lane interstate highway. The officer had responded to a jackknife and overturned pickup trailer combination that was blocking an entrance ramp to the interstate northbound lanes, and that's the photo that you see on the screen. So to assist with traffic control, the officer positioned his patrol unit south of the entrance ramp on lane 3, and a Tennessee Department of Transportation help truck operator positioned his vehicle next to the patrol unit to block the shoulder and lane 4. So this gives you an overview of the scene. The red line that you see is the path of the motorhome. I have marked lanes 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first from left to right, the first blue vehicle is the patrol unit of the officer involved. And below in lane 4 is the help truck. And then again, you can see the path of the motorhome. And then to the far right would be your truck and trailer combination that was blocking the entranceway. So the officer and the help truck driver were standing between their vehicles when the motorhome approached the scene in lane 3. The driver of the motorhome stated that the traffic volume prevented him from moving to the left. So as a result, he attempted to drive between the police unit and the help truck, striking the officer and dragging him under the trailer that the motorhome was towing. So the help truck operator and the officer were facing each other between their two vehicles. They were discussing traffic control when the help truck operator noticed a large motorhome pulling a trailer, traveling toward them, and realized the motorhome was not going to stop. The help truck operator yelled, "Look out," ran in front of his truck towards the right shoulder of the interstate. And according to the help truck operator, the officer turned facing the motorhome, waving his arms as if to say, "Stop." The motorhome continued traveling through the cones, sideswiped the help truck, and then struck the officer. The officer was pinned underneath the trailer and dragged 117 feet before the motorhome reached its resting point with the officer trapped under the trailer. The motorist told the investigating officer that as he approached the crash site, he saw the dynamic messaging sign, which is controlled by the Tennessee Department of Transportation. So those of you that may or may not know this, so the dynamic messaging sign are used to alert motorists of travel conditions, amber alerts, severe weather, and so forth and so on. And it was located approximately 2 miles south of the crash scene, and it was alerting motorists traveling northbound of a right lane closure ahead. So at that time, the sign said right lane closed. In response, the motorhome driver moved to the left from lane 4 to lane 3 and continued driving. The driver stated that his speed was approximately 60 miles per hour, and he came around what he described as a blind curve in the road. He could see the patrol unit and the help truck blocking the 2 right lanes, as well as the 2 people standing between the vehicles. And he stated that he was not able to move over into lane 2 due to the traffic density. So although he saw the two people standing between the help truck and the patrol unit, he thought driving through the opening was the only option. And in the interview, he said he took the path of least resistance. So this is a screenshot from a video for a recreation of the motorist visibility 900 feet south of the crash site. And you will see the patrol unit and the help truck circled. So the photo is not the greatest quality because it's a screen grab from a video. But so the crash investigation unit investigated this incident. And during their investigation, they used an older police department command vehicle that was similar in size and geometry to the motorhome. And they used that to recreate the motorist actions. So at 900 feet south of the crash site, the park patrol unit and help truck were clearly visible. The investigator used some mathematical computations to determine if the motorist should have been able to see the patrol unit and the help truck, perceive the situation, and stop within 900 feet. Using the calculations, it was determined that traveling at 60 miles per hour, it would have taken the motorist 10.23 seconds to travel 900 feet. By subtracting the 1.6 second perception to reaction time from the 10.23 second travel time, the motorist had 8.63 seconds remaining to take action. During the 1.6 second perception to reaction time, the motorist traveled 140.73 feet, reducing the available stopping distance to 759.27 feet. So then the investigating officer computed the distance needed for the motorhome to come to a stop. So it was determined that 300 to 600 feet would be necessary for the motorhome to come to a stop with normal braking. So an example of normal braking would be driving down a road, seeing a traffic light ahead turn red, and you apply your brakes. Emergency braking would have reduced the distance necessary for the motorhome to come to a stop. So viewing the photographs taken at the scene, it was determined that the motorist did not begin braking until coming in contact with the help truck. And at that time, the motorist applied emergency braking. So they measured the tire marks from where the braking began to the final resting point of the motorhome, and the investigator determined the distance for the motorhome to come to a final resting point was 117 feet. So given the viewing distance, it was concluded that the motorhome driver should have been able to stop in time with normal braking. So contributing factors that we found in this investigation was the motorhome driver did not slow down and merge left, the position of the patrol unit, the traffic location of the law enforcement officer and the vehicle position, the law enforcement officer looking away from oncoming traffic, and the delay in updating the dynamic message sign. Recommendations that we found in this case were state, county, and municipal authorities should consider promoting public awareness campaigns to inform motorists of the risk that law enforcement officers face while operating along the roadside and the need to follow the move over law. So in this case, the message boards, temporary traffic control devices, and emergency vehicles were activated with directional lighting. They were all positioned to direct motorists to move to the left. However, the motorist continued driving in the restricted travel lanes, believing that he was unable to merge left due to the traffic density in lanes 1 and 2. So public awareness campaigns to educate the motoring public on the dangers faced by emergency responders when assisting in traffic incidents, and the need to either move over or to encourage motorists in unblocked travel lanes to increase vehicle spacing to facilitate left merging of traffic could eliminate or decrease the risk for law enforcement officers being struck by motorists. So as we know, one of the most dangerous actions law enforcement officers make during their shift is getting out of their patrol unit while parked on the side of the road. So the purpose of the move over law is to protect law enforcement officers and other workers from being hit by passing vehicles. However, being struck and killed is a major cause of law enforcement deaths. Failure of motorists to move over remains a significant concern for the safety of officers and emergency responders. Therefore, a continual public awareness campaign to educate the public and promote the move over law is necessary. Also, to move to a safe area within an established temporary traffic control zone and maintain situational awareness. So during this incident, the men were standing facing each other with their backs towards their vehicles. The approaching traffic was not in direct line of vision with the officer or the help truck operator. Continuous assessment of the scene is necessary to keep the scene as safe as possible, to identify safety factors that must be considered, as well as adjusting the traffic management system accordingly. There's 3 phases or processes that are necessary to achieve situational awareness. That's perception of the elements in the environment, understanding the current situation, and predicting future actions of the element in the environment. In this incident, an example of a safe location to communicate would have been perhaps on the shoulder of the road, several yards in front of the help truck. We also recommended to develop a standard operating procedure for traffic incident management. This may improve the safety of emergency responders. So the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, develops voluntary standards and recommends practices that can be adopted by any agency or organization. NFPA 1091 standard for traffic control incident management personnel professional qualifications. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Applies to anyone who performs temporary traffic control duties at incident scenes, regardless of the agency the individual belongs. So the standard was developed in response to the need to mitigate the risk for the responders and specifies the minimum job performance requirements for traffic control incident management personnel. So the last recommendation is to position patrol units and other emergency vehicles to maximize the protected work zone for the emergency responders. So the largest vehicle should be used as the initial blocking vehicle. Positioning the vehicles closer together to oncoming traffic covering lanes 3 and 4 may have provided more of a visible cue for the motorist to choose to merge into lane 2 traffic rather earlier, or attempt to come to a stop before colliding with the blocking response vehicles or attempting to go between. So of the 5 law enforcement officer motor vehicle fatality investigations that we conducted under the pilot project, the most frequent recommendations to help mitigate the risk that LEOs face for motor vehicle related incidents where there was a need for a standard operating procedure to be created and or followed. There was a need for officer training and retraining. Officers need to maintain situational awareness, understand the incident command system, and for many of the crashes, it was a situation of buckle up and slow down. So besides the NIOSH reports, other products the division has created include some scientific articles, trade journal articles, fact sheets, toolkits, infographics, and some social media messaging. Most recent infographic, this one is associated with the Drive to Arrive Alive campaign. And most recently, this is a Struck By infographic that I helped create, and it was based on the law enforcement officer struck by fatality investigations from our program. And that's all of this stuff is visible on our webpage. I just wanted to include this slide to show some of our partner support for the FACE program and our investigations. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions or comments, and I will turn my camera back on.
Well, thank you so much for that, Melanie. And I wanted to really thank you for participating and sharing that information. I've read a number of the investigations that you guys have done, and there have been some very solid recommendations that come out of those investigations that are really important. One of the things that I was struck by in your presentation that I'd forgotten to mention, we're always talking about the lives and the injuries. And you mentioned putting the heaviest piece of equipment, downstream to ensure that that's blocking what's coming at you, and actually, I guess that would be upstream. Excuse me. You have a number of fire apparatus, DOT apparatus, patrol cars that are blocking, that get struck, and even if the officer isn't injured, the toll that it takes on equipment, especially if it's some fire department that can't immediately replace their truck or their pumper. That's another thing that this committee that I had mentioned in Harrisburg, and by the way, I really like those graphics, that this committee in Harrisburg had lots of fire folks in it, because the fire department already has this culture of safety, and the fire department already has the NFPA. Law enforcement doesn't really have that national regulation, if you will. And that's one of the things that this committee and these folks are looking at is, again, not just the toll in lives, which of course is the most important thing, but also just the millions and millions of dollars in damaged equipment, whether somebody was injured or not, that is part of what I think a lot of us think are D drivers, which are drugged, drowsy, distracted. One guy at the meeting had a whole other litany of Ds to go on to that was, sort of distracted beyond that, but being angry and all this other stuff that affect how you drive. So I just wanted to make that point. We did have one question that came in, and that was with regard to preventable crashes. What would I consider to be a preventable crash, or what is the most preventable crash? I mean, to me, I talked about single vehicle crashes, and I think you talked about in your presentation vehicles coming and going to duty assignments. And we still haven't gotten, even in all the research we've done, a good answer on what is happening in some of those crashes. And I've shown in our previous research that a lot of those folks are unbelted. They're going too fast, but they're not expediting to an assignment. So it really is sad to me that we're losing people who are traveling to training or going to the jail to pick up a prisoner or whatever it may be, and they're not even in anything that would require them to drive in any kind of a risky fashion. So that would be my answer to that. I also want to pass congratulations to you. You're just a few days away from getting married, so all of us wish you the best, and want to thank you. Mr. Price, do you have any last words to impart? No, maybe he may not be able to chime back in. Anyway, again, thank you again, Melanie. And if any of you, this presentation will be up on our website. It won't be up tomorrow, but it should be up soon after that. If you want to download it, if anybody wants a copy of my PowerPoint, they're more than welcome to it. I tell everybody there are no secrets here. This is all designed to help save lives. And the last two things I'll mention that the Memorial Fund here, the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum are involved in. I mentioned the Destination Zero program. Destination Zero has 4 components. One of them is a traffic safety program, so a traffic safety award. So we're always looking for agencies to put in for that award, to submit what they're doing to reduce crashes, to get their officers to wear seatbelts, to get them to slow down. We've had several successful programs highlighted on the Destination Zero program. And as I mentioned, we're going to be giving the National Officer Safety and Wellness Awards out on October 15th. The last thing I'll mention, which again goes towards law enforcement, and I know I'm Mr. Doom and Gloom, I guess, with what we have to report on, but Safe LEO. Safe LEO stands for Suicide Awareness for Law Enforcement Officers. This is another initiative that I'm personally involved with here at the Memorial Fund, as well as the Bureau of Justice Assistance and IIR. And it is an excellent training program to get agencies at every level to begin to address the epidemic of suicides in law enforcement. And if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I think we may have another question. So yeah, we do have another question for you, Melanie. How long is the average officer fatality investigation? How long does it take?
So it kind of depends on the department. We do the investigation. The investigation itself with the interviews is a matter of a few days to a week. Once we gather all the information, it takes 6 months or so to get the report drafted. That's just gathering all the information. We have a very extensive review process that goes through NIOSH. We have lots of people that have to look at it before, and then of course we have the SMEs that look at it, and we send it back to the department. So it's a lengthy process. I would say anywhere between 6 months to a year before we get those reports published.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else? So the other question that came in is about, and I don't know that you, Melanie, would necessarily know about this, but about studies with regard to LED lights. In our last presentation, we did talk about the fire service looking at the effect of LED lights at night scenes and blinding motorists. And I know that they had mentioned our 2 friends from the Emergency Responder Safety Institute are still looking at that. Law enforcement has been looking at it. And if you've ever noticed with the LED lights, if you come up on a traffic stop at night from a distance, the red and the blue make it look like it's purple. But more than that, the lights, as you may know, can interfere with doing standard field sobriety tests, the SFSTs. They can affect that, but they're also just blinding. And so I think that, to answer your question, I think that's an ongoing study. But as you saw in the last presentation, they did decide on how to set settings for their fire apparatus to a standard pattern that wasn't too distracting, and they lowered the intensity of the lights. So you got those alternating blinking lights to get your attention, but they weren't these big, bright, glaring things that were sort of going all in different pulsating manners. So, but to answer your question, I think that what we had heard in the last presentation was really all there was on that. So. Okay, I think that's about our time. Again, I really want to thank you for sharing that investigation with us and everything that you guys are doing out there at NIOSH. And of course, we wish you the best. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this came through smoothly. Technology being what it is, we always are concerned about you all being able to see it and hear it and get it the way we want you to absorb it. So thank you all for your diligence, and hopefully I'll see you all with our next guest in about 4 months. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.